Terence McKenna, Go It Alone, Wisdom for Life channel. How many of you have ever heard of Terence McKenna? You ever read any of his stuff? Naturally, this is not a coincidence as all of a sudden Terence McKenna and Go It Alone pops up in front of me. So naturally I'm gonna watch it because there's a few things that he said that I'm going to share on here that are actually very profound, and yet at the same token that's actually very simple. And because I don't have any better example other than to sort of translate how I experience the cosmos, and particularly in my own youth, because I experienced a lot of psychedelics in my own youth, okay? And he mentioned a couple things about how, for example, when you go to CNN, they tell you the weather in Baghdad. They tell you how it's going over here. They tell us how it's going over here. And these are the presenters that he said you fall into this how did he put it? Sort of, I call it feeling like a safe place. Okay? You have something communicating to you that's telling you about the world around you that you're not directly experiencing. And this sort of ties directly into some things that happen that, even though they're sort of acronyms or buzzwords, that in and of themselves tell you a lot about the hidden meaning in some of these things. When he talked about going it alone. Okay? So, for example, when I was about 15 years of age, besides having smoked my first bud, if you will, which was grown down in Mexico called Oaxaca, which was a pretty good seed as I remember it, and then having smoked some pretty good hashish that came from Afghanistan that was known as hand-pressed oil base, which was very good, and then, of course, having taken DMT. Okay? So he mentioned that those that hadn't had it in a long time are still processing it. Okay? So the point that he was trying to make, which is really sort of an echo of that point, is that when you experience nature and what nature has to teach you, natural analog substances, if you will, you're experiencing the universe of knowledge that is out there to experience what nature has to teach us. And he was relaying how, for example, there are a lot of people that are afraid of going out into nature. Okay? And I just found that so, wow, really. And then I remember how I grew up and I was told about the buddy system. Okay? That you got to have somebody with you, that in case something happens to you, there's always going to be somebody there to rescue you, right? And so for somebody like me, essentially what that means is that I have a reason to fear that something's going to happen to me. And if I write that into my DNA time strip, that there's always that possibility, then I'm not actually getting real with myself and what I know myself to be true, which is what love is in living spirit, which is eternal light. So as I've tried to mention before, when I talked about the nature of what I knew about myself as a child, because I'm running at such a high rate of speed, I'm wanting to experience everything that the universe has to teach me as fast as I possibly can, because I want to experience everything there is to experience that I can learn from it. So I'm talking about nature, the real universe, the nature of the way that energy unfolds in nature, to show you how nature works with energy. So naturally, as a little boy, being a little Indian, I'm gravitated towards being in nature. Alone. I wasn't saying, Mama, you got to come with me so I can feel safe being in nature. Daddy, I want you to come with me to keep me safe when I go into nature. There's something intuitively that you know within your own soul, within your spirit, that you're perfectly safe being in nature. Nature became my refuge. That became my spiritual sanctuary. To be with the great living spirit of a very powerful teacher. When you are seeking knowledge through the great living spirit is the energy system in a planet, she will show you much. So when you don't live in fear of the cosmos, when you don't live in fear of what the universe has to show us, but instead you are chomping at the bit, you can't wait to learn more that nature has to show you, because you have such a driving thirst to learn. That's a spiritual pathway of learning and seeking knowledge through the light, and the light will share that knowledge with you. Because the light recognizes a student that has a thirst for the knowledge the light has to show you, which means you don't fear anything, which means you don't fear the source from which it all comes. Instead, nature is your teacher. So when I thought about what he said when it means to go alone, because people used to ask me that what is a guy who's nearly 60 some odd years of age, all by himself, having a number of different injuries that he has, is willing to go that far back into nature all by himself without anybody with him. And I'll share this with you because this happened. But I was on the Shasta Trinity National Forest back in 2013 when I'd had a hernia operation in 2003, and because of some medication that I'd been on for years for the pain as a result of some things that didn't go right, I ended up being in a remote campground all by myself, and I developed a bowel obstruction. And as a result of that, I couldn't get out on a phone and call 911 because there wasn't any service where I was. I had to crawl to my truck on my hands and knees, realizing I was dying. Got up on the seat and managed to drive that four-wheel drive truck into a town 50 miles away, and practically collapsed out of the truck when I got there, and they rushed me in an ambulance to an emergency room where they did an emergency operation to clear the obstruction. What's funny about that is I ended up going back in nature to heal again. Excuse me. It's funny how these things work. But it's just like when you smoke a marijuana plant that's, if you will, a natural seed that's got the energies that haven't been manipulated through artificial intelligence, which means they come directly from her. So you're getting the good stuff. So when you're experiencing the plant, you're experiencing the consciousness of the energy that produced it. So you're experiencing the consciousness that was producing the experience of the experiencer that was imagining the consciousness that was producing it, that you're now experiencing it. And this is when you begin to realize that when you're having experiences that come through nature, what it means to have infinite creative imagination of what's possible to experience in your own mind. Because the experiences that I've had, having taken a number of different natural substance psychedelics, I could write stories about that kind of stuff of what I experienced, that you won't ever be able to experience and share how unbelievable an altered state is. Because that means that once you take that substance that is nature, there isn't any turning back. You've never experienced something before, which means you have to trust nature. You have to trust the universe that you live in. So when you are trusting implicitly what nature is, the natural part of the cosmos, then you are fearless. Because you're willing to go it alone and experience the universe yourself. The universe is showing you how the universe works within your own soul, within your own spirit. And you did so living in no fear to experience the unknown. That's what it means to live in no fear with nature. Because you come out the other side of that having realized that you have just gained an enormous amount of knowledge that otherwise would have been left alone had you not experienced it. That's what Hendricks meant when he said, "Are you experienced? How experienced are you?" If you haven't had a chance to learn and listen to Terence McKenna or read any of his material, or been on a ayahuasca journey down in Peru or the Amazon, you'd be surprised what it means to truly heal in nature. Because that's where healing takes place, is within ourselves and within the relationship we have with the natural world. That's what it's always meant to me about getting real. Is when the soul and spirit has been healed, in which you come back into alignment with the spirit and nature, which is the girl and the planet. You'll begin to have an entirely new relationship, not only with yourself, but with the natural world in which the energy that represents what she is what we use to sustain ourselves. Because I could never understand why it is that people would behave in such ways that I've explained in all my previous videos, when you can learn to love the learning journey that we're on together through her in this planet that has so much to teach everybody that is here. You know, which is it's really why the Indians honor the matriarch, because, at least for me, when I was a little boy and I fell in love with my first girlfriend in second grade, it was always something that your intuition knows, because the girl is the birth giver. And when you know that the birth giver is the birth giver of creation, which life comes out of her, you intuitively know that she must know things, particularly when it comes to nature, the natural world in which life comes out of her with the first sound vibration of love, that she might have something to teach us, instead of believing that we're going to hold her captive to our demand. That's sort of how I perceived it through the Ring of Saturn, when I realized that that part of Western culture was to hold nature captive, the birth giver of creation captive, the girl in the planet captive, and pillage and plunder from her. How did this happen? How did it get inverted? Anyway, I thought it was important to share that, because there is a wealth of knowledge that Terence McKenna himself has learned from, that I myself have learned from through the same process that nature and the universe has to share with us on a journey that we live in no fear of learning from. Anyway, have a good night. I love you all. Be good to yourselves.